Hello everyone, in this video I want to show you how to make this sphere sculpture. So there's a couple of things involved. You do need two MoGraphs and a floor object here, and I have a few different lights set up. Think I have three lights, and also I have the sky object that I made. And I'm going to show you how to make this step by step so you can follow along. And and the end result you're going to have, if I go back to my picture viewer. As you can see, this is the render before any sort of color correction or effects in Photoshop. And obviously you can make this 20 times better if you wanted to. And here's some previous renders that I was doing just to test it and so on. So let's begin. I'm going to open a new scene and I'm going to show you how to set this up and render it out as simple as possible. So I'm going to do File, New, and let me just delete these objects here. So first of all, we have to start with the floor. What you're going to do is click on the cube here and create a plane. First, before clicking C, which means you can edit it, you have to go to actual properties of the plane and drop the segments to 1 and 1. And now we can click C and rename this floor. And now let's click on the floor and I'm going to go to the edges so I can extrude and make that floor that you've seen in the thumbnail. So now I'm going to highlight on this edge just by clicking on it and extrude once and move it to the side. And now I'm going to change it to world coordinates and I'm going to extrude up so we have something like this. And now all I'm going to do is take the side edges by holding shift and highlighting these three edges and extruding or moving them to the right so we have like a simple floor setup here. And let me just move these two back a little bit. And now all I'm going to do is take these two edges and bevel them. So I'm going to click B and bevel. And I'm going to increase the subdivisions quite a bit, maybe 2. And now I'm going to click Q in my case to go back to um, use object on model mode, which puts me back to the state where I can create more objects. Now let's create our main object, which is the sphere, the one that we used to create the sculpture. So now let's click on the cube again, make the sphere, click on the sphere, click T for scale, and let's scale this down quite a bit, maybe something like this. And the placement of the sphere doesn't really matter, but you can put it in the middle. And now we're going to drop this sphere inside the MoGraph cloner. So you can just click and hold Control and click on cloner. And now let's drop the sphere inside the cloner, and we have 3 spheres instead of. So now let's click on the cloner and rename this first. We're gonna have 2 cloners in order to make this work. So now let's click on cloner here, and for mode, go to radial. And as you can see, we have something like this. And now all we have to do for this part is play around with the radius. So we can just bring down the radius, and you can do whatever you like in this point. So let's do maybe 42. And we have something like this in place. Now let's drop another cloner in there. So let's do a MoGraph cloner and take the first cloner and make a child of the second cloner. And as you can see, we have something like this. And that's because it's set to the second cloner. We can just put second, rename it second. Now we can just take the second cloner and also set it to radial. And now we can just adjust it and move these. If you don't see these handles, you can just hit right here or hit E for move tool. And now let's just bring this to the middle of the scene. And also we have to rotate it. So I clicked R and now I'm rotating and holding shift 90 degrees so it's facing the camera. Now all we have to do is click on the second cloner, go to transform, and let's find the one that we need. Not this one, not this one, and I think it's this right here. And let me just go to the object and play around with the radius a little bit more. So for in my case it's 107. And let me try to go back here and find the one I need in terms of rotation. So it was actually H. So in here you can adjust the rotation of each one, and now we can go back to the object mode and play around with the radius. So maybe something like this. And now let's go back to transform, and actually we can put this back to 0 and play around with the H and get the same look that I got in mine. And you don't have to be exact, you can play around and get something that you like, or something that is interesting to you. So now we're getting something like this, which is kind of nice. And now all we have to do is kind of scale this down a bit. So let's click on the second cloner, hit T, and by holding shift, let's just scale this down and place it somewhat in the center. So we have something like this. And let's play around a little bit more with the transform of the H. I think something like this will work. And maybe for the first cloner, I'll go to the object, and for the radius, let's play around. Maybe 20 is okay, I think. Let me just make sure it's touching the floor here. So I'm going to bring it down just like this. So now this is the easy sort of setup to get the look that you wanted to. So at this point we have set up all the objects. So we have the floor and the main object, the sculpture out of spheres. And now all we have to do is add a little bit of lighting to the scene. So let's do that. First, let me just create a few lights. So as you can see here, we can click on these lights. If we go back to my previous scene, I had 3 lights, front, right, and left, and also the sky. So let me just go back to the previous one, and let's add a few lights in there. So if you click on this and create area light, and all you have to do is make it smaller. So I just click T and I made it smaller, and I'm just going to move it to the left of the object, and let's rename this left. So now let's change the colors quite a bit. So let's do maybe 10% yellow, and for the intensity we'll do 60%. And now we also have to activate the shadows, which is going to be area shadows. And the details tab, just go scroll down to fall off and set it to inverse square accurate. And now you have something like this, and this is going to be your first light. And also if you wanted to, you can angle it down, maybe something like this. I'm just rotating and holding shift, and rotation is R. And now let's take this light and duplicate it. I'm holding control and dragging, and now we're just gonna click on the world coordinates again and turn this around 180. And now we have the second light facing the camera, or facing the object on the right side. So let's rename this right. And now let's change the color. Maybe let's do green. And all the other settings are already set up for us, so we can just keep it. And now the last thing is to duplicate this light one more time. Click R, rotate it towards the object 90, and just bring it in, something like this, and position it in the right spot. So this is what we got so far, 3 lights. And for the last step, all we have to do, or for the last light, should I say, all we have to do is create the sky object. So if you click on this floor here, create a sky, we have everything set up. Our sky, 3 lights, and our floor. And if you want to see what that looks like so far, let's just create a camera. So we have the camera here, and let's change the focal length to normal, which is 50 millimeters. And now let's jump inside the camera and position the camera properly. So maybe something like this. And let's jump out of the camera and just double check and jump inside, and let's give it a quick little render, see what that looks like. So as you can see, guys, this is what we're getting so far without any materials and sort of effects. So let's add the materials next, and let's get this thing finished. So for the floor, let's just double click. We're not going to do anything fancy. I think in my case I did it 95% color for the floor, and reflectance, I didn't have any reflectance. And what else did I change? For the model, I just chose the second one, and I brought the fall off to I think 20%. And this is all I did for the floor. It's just a basic white floor. So let's put that on, drag and drop and put that on the floor. The next material, we'll do the main object. So let's double click. For the color, I just clicked on texture and added gradient. If you go inside the gradient, you can play around with the colors. In my case, I did orange. So let me just set that up. I think I did something like this. 3 colors. The first two just orange. In this case, let's do blue. So blue and blue. And for this one, let's do maybe, for example, let's do red in the middle. And now all you have to do is change the type to star and increase the turbulence. I think in my case I did 50%. And now you have something like this. And also if you want, you can crank it up even more and get different effects. So maybe let's do 60. And I'm just gonna bring these back quite a bit so we get to see more of the turbulence effect on here. And I didn't play around with any scale, anything like that. And for the next step, reflectance, just delete the default specular. Let's add Beckman. And for roughness, I think I did 5%. For this option right under the type, I set it back to additive, so it goes over the whole sphere. And for the reflectance, if you click on this little black arrow, it's going to bring down more options where you can plug in textures. And in this case, I did Fresnel, which is going to give a really nice natural fall off. And for overall, let's see here, for overall reflection, you can just bring it down to 60%, so it's not too reflective. And now if you scroll down for the bump, we can also add a custom bump. So do custom bump map, and in here just click on this arrow where it says texture and bring in noise. And if you go inside the noise, all I did is bring the scale of the global scale to 50%, and we're getting something like this. And also for the strength, let's do 5, so it's not too crazy. And now from this point, all you have to do is take this texture, just left click and drag onto bump and drop it inside this arrow. And now all you have to do is activate the actual bump. So as you can see, it's working, and it's not working if you don't click this little check mark next to it. And now all you have to do is bring this down to also 5%, and we're pretty much done with this material. So now let's apply this material by holding, dragging, and dropping on the second cloner. Also, what you can do is actually drop it on the sphere, and it will look much better this way. And I think that's actually what I did in my previous example. And now for the last material, double click, and let's go inside. And this is going to be our sky material, so we don't need reflectance, we don't need color. All we need is luminance. And in here, all I did is click on this little arrow, go down to surface, and for this case, all you have to click on is clouds, and you're gonna get something like this. If you go inside the clouds texture, just bring down the levels, or bring up the levels to about 70, so we have a nice contrast. And that's about it. And now all you have to do is drop the sky onto the sky object. And now, as you can see, this is what we're getting. Now in terms of effects and changing the overall look, if you go inside the sky object and go inside the illumination, bring down both the strength of global illumination and saturation to about 50 or 60%. So let's do 50-60. And inside the render settings to get a nice result, change the renderer to physical. And for the effects, let's add ambient occlusion. Make sure you change the maximum ray depth to 20 or 200, or the maximum ray length to 200, and the color, bring it down towards the white, so maybe 30% gray, and click OK. And now for global illumination, let's do QMC for the primary, secondary light mapping, and inside the light mapping tab, just change the path count to 6,000. And that's basically it, guys. And for the overall look and the noise and the quality, you can also change these settings. What I did from mine as I did automatic, and I dropped these to, and I dropped the shading error threshold to 10%, and I increased the subdivisions of blurriness, shadow, and ambient occlusion to 3. But in this case, I'm going to bring it back to normal or low, and I just want to give you a quick render and show you what that looks like. So let's jump back in the camera and click render, and let's see what that looks like. Alright guys, so this is the result that we got. So the render just finished, and if you compare to my previous one, this is the high quality when I increase the subdivisions and samples and then the noise. And if we go back, this is the result that we got. Alright guys, this is basically it, and hopefully you can make your own little sculpture out of spheres and you'll learn something in this video. Thank you for watching. Please like and share this video, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, guys. Have a nice day.